Do you struggle with building a collaborative relationship with sales, or perhaps convincing the vice president of sales and marketing of why your budget is important and the types of activities you're doing is important, or how to prove that value and that influence on the sale? Well, because of all these reasons, I'm bringing on a guest who just recently published a book on sales and marketing, alignment, communication, trust, systems. We're going to touch all of that during this episode. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, True Marketing. True is a full-service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit truemarketing.com. And now, on with our podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. I'm joined today by A. Lee Judge. He's the co-founder and CMO of Content Monster. Welcome to the show, Lee.
Hey, Wendy, thanks for having me.
Well, Lee, I first met you years ago, I think at Content Marketing World, where we were both speakers. And maybe, I don't know, we were grabbing a quick bite between sessions. And it sounded to me at the time, you speak a lot, right? You're on that marketing circuit. Tell me about why that's important to you.
Well, I was talking to Mark Schaefer last week. We were both in the speaker's room, actually, at Social Media Marketing World. And I was telling him about how in 2017, I was kind of rebuilding my personal brand. I had been a DJ. I've been in the entertainment industry for a long time, and I was getting a pretty good foothold in the business marketing world, so to speak. And I've always been a marketer, always been in business, but this was a brand pivot, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I knew that speaking in one-to-many conversations was always important. I learned that from being in radio. Like one-to-many is how I've learned to communicate. And so, speaking is something that it's my superpower, so to speak. It's my unfair advantage. And so when I looked at, what is it that I have that comes extremely easy to me that can help me accelerate beyond other people, what they can't do. Like, for example, I hate numbers. I'm not going to be an accountant, right? That's not my superpower, right? Some people who love working through numbers all day. That's their superpower. Mine is that I have zero stage fright. I love speaking. I love educating. I love teaching. I love meeting people. And so speaking is something that comes very natural to me, and I enjoy doing it. And so weaving that into the building of a personal brand, the building of a company, even promoting, products and solutions, speaking is something that I can naturally do. So I leaned into it.
Yeah. And you're great at it. And it shows because you keep getting invited back again and again. And here we are.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good. Well, I am excited to talk about your new book. So it's called Cash, the 4 Keys to Better Sales, Smarter Marketing, and a Supercharged Revenue Machine. Sounds interesting. I can't wait to hear more about it. I'll confess I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to pick it up. So this will be the teaser for us and the audience on what this book is all about. Supercharged Revenue Machine. Who doesn't want that?
Yes. And, shout out to Ann Hanley on that one because, I went through a bunch of different titles and I kind of worked the title, and I'm blessed to have a group of author friends and connections. And so I ran it through a lot of them. And one of the words that stood out was the alliteration of, sales and sales, smarter, and supercharged, the alliteration of the S. So, you know what, Ann, you got something there. Not to mention that she's a mentor of, in terms of writing books.
Yeah.
So she gets credibility for having her voice has weight, I should say.
Yes.
So when that word came up, I said, you know what, I'm going to go with it. And
awesome.
Here we go.
I love it. I love it. And when we talked previously to hit and record here today, you talked about CASH is actually an acronym.
Yeah. So in my years working between marketing and sales, and this is about a uh, 15 to 20-year journey where I happened to be a marketer who was put in charge of working with marketing operations and sales operations and having to pull these two teams together. And being placed between these two teams kind of became my specialty. And over those years, I saw that there were certain things that caused these teams not to work at their best potential because they weren't working together as one revenue team, as I call it. And so the four things that I saw pop up the most happened to be problems with communication, alignment, the systems they use, or the honesty about how they're reporting and working together. And it just so happened that those four things come together in a very good acronym, CASH, that is very resonant with a sales team or a marketing team
Yeah.
because you need cash for your business to move forward.
Yes, you do. Yeah, no one can grow without cash. And
Yep.
uh, having one leader over all of that is such a smart thing, right? Would you say that some of the division between marketing and sales is lack of that leadership that has accountability for both?
Absolutely, because often the leadership, they come from a certain area and they know their area very well. So now we're seeing, the evolution of more CROs or chief revenue officers. But even then, this is still, I think, in its infancy of understanding how to structure that leadership structure. Because so let's look at traditionally, you have your CMO, your chief marketing officer, who may have come from more of a creative space to be a chief marketing officer, or even if it's a market analytics space, it's still focused on the world before the sale. Like
Mhm.
who could buy our product? Who is available to buy our product? How do we find them? But even that doesn't necessarily tie to the bottom line of what happens when we find these people, right? What happens when we discover and penetrate this market? Then what happens? So that leaves the CMO almost like the stepchild outside of the C-suite, right? The C-suite doesn't respect the CMO the way they
Yeah.
would, say, even a VP of sales. And the route to the upper parts of the C-suite, say to the CEO, typically the CMO track doesn't get you there. That's the
Yeah.
peak. Whereas your CRO may come from a sales position, and that track has a much higher potential to reach the C suite and to the CEO because it's more likely to have been a sales position. Now, in that comes its own complications where the CRO may be so performance driven, so number driven, they don't understand the important nuances of marketing. So we still have this disconnect. And that's partly why, mostly why I wrote this book to explain whether you're a CMO or CRO or you report to these two people, here's how you navigate this situation so that as a marketer, you create content or you create marketing that can be reported on the bottom line and makes sense to the bottom line. As a salesperson, how can you be a better salesperson by understanding the nuances of marketing and all the value marketing has that can make you a better salesperson? And then also, think about who you're reporting to because how you report and what you report is directed by who you're reporting to. So even for those leaders, this book is for them to understand if you have reports under you in marketing or sales, what to expect from them and how to pull these teams together to drive true revenue.
Sounds like a fun book group exercise for both leaders or both groups together.
It
Yeah.
is. And you
Yeah.
mentioned speaking. So it's funny when I go in to speak somewhere, even though it's not the best speaker etiquette, I like to ask a question of who's in the room. Like, I want to know, is it a room full of marketers, a room full of salespeople, if it's a good mix as it should be, or if their leaders are there, because I want to have a message for each of those three people and make sure they understand how they can better organize what they do to reach the common goal of driving business forward.
Yeah, it matters. Absolutely, that audience matters. Good. Well, I would love to spend a little bit of time unpacking each of the four areas. So let's start with communication. And that seems like the most obvious to us marketers why communication is important. But why did you choose that to be one of the four pillars of this book? And what are some of the gaps there?
Well, because there's often a breakdown there, and that's where sales doesn't always recognize the value that marketing brings. And marketing may miss the target on what they're doing because they haven't heard from sales. For example, sales is on the front line. They're more likely to have that touch with the customer. And the customer has a certain language of how they describe their problem, their pain, even the product that they're looking to purchase. The customer has that language. I always say it's the customer's journey, not ours. And so we try to formulate this journey for the customer, but if we listen to what sales sees on the front line and they communicate that back to marketing, then marketing can create the marketing that makes the leads they find better for sales. So it's a constant circle. And we often hear this scenario where sales says there's this loop where sales says we need more leads, and then marketing creates more leads, and then sales says, well, there's too many leads, are not good enough. These aren't the right leads, and so then marketing goes back and creates more leads, or they narrow it down to be more specific, but then it's not enough leads, and sales says, wait, we need more leads. So that cycle, the root of that cycle is communication. If sales is more participates more in helping marketing craft who to go after, then marketing can create better leads. And so if the messaging that marketing sends out, an example I always joke about in my speeches is, we have the new widget 9000 with all these wonderful features. Meanwhile, sales is hearing the customer say, we want a screwdriver. So why isn't that in the marketing language, right? The widget 9000 could be the most amazing, highly technical screwdriver ever invented. It just does it on its own. But that's what's in the marketing message. And it doesn't resonate because the customer is saying we need a better screwdriver. And from a marketing standpoint, we do marketing stuff. We make things sound amazing and wonderful. And that's our goal, to bring things to market. But we can miss the point if sales says, look, they don't know what this widget 9000 thing is. They just asked for a screwdriver. They went looking for, a video on how to, find a better screwdriver. All they found was the widget 9000 is awesome. Those kind of things. That's kind of simplification of the problem, but you can imagine within your own marketing team how much marketing runs campaigns that may or may not speak the language of the customer. And so I think we'll just leave it at that one thing, that for sales to get better leads, which is what they always want, they need to talk with marketing to say, this is what we see in the field, and this is what our customers say. Or even better yet, these are the objections we see in the field. I always encourage marketers, get in the meeting, go to the sales meeting, make notes. Every time a salesperson has to report to their report and say, well, why didn't this deal go through? There's going to be an objection. Well, because of pricing, because the button was on the right side, not the left side, because our competitor has this. Every objection is a source of content, but that content cannot be created unless it's communicated from sales to marketing.
Yeah, and proactively, not just whining about leads or whatever. I have another great example that you reminded me of. My husband for many years was a technology salesperson, and so here I'm sitting in the marketing seat, and he just would complain about marketing. And one of his big ones was having claims that the product can do certain things that it really can't do. And so him having to manage customers and say, oh no, it actually doesn't do that. Or the customers buying a product, it doesn't live up to its promise. And then feeding that back and saying, we have to change messaging or we're going to lose credibility here. So
I'm so glad you said that, because there's actually an aside in the book where I have a little mini, I won't call it a rant, but it's definitely an aside where I say, look, if you're buying software, this is more in the systems part of the book. If you're buying software, try to get past the salesperson and even the marketing team and get to the tech team, the developers, the product team, because they're going to be more honest about it. They're going to be proud of their product, and they're going to maybe tell you what the product can do today versus what we want it to do. Because sales and marketing is going to sell you where the product is going versus where it is. So that's a good point. I mean, the messaging has to be, and this also goes into the honesty part of the book, which we'll get to, but we have to be very clear and honest about what our product or service does today, as opposed to what we want our customers to believe.
Okay. I jumped the gun on that one. Well, before we get to honesty, the next section of your book is on alignment. So we talked about communication. What is alignment? More a formal process, or how do we talk about alignment?
Well, the two main things are alignment in measurement and alignment in, as we mentioned, messaging. So we'll talk
Okay.
about the messaging part first. I had a marketer just a few weeks ago tell me that they were like, "Wow, this book resonates with me because," and the story they told me was that the sales team was involved in an upcoming. They knew there was going to be a merger and acquisition coming up, a merger coming up, and because of that, what they were selling had to pivot a little bit because the company they were buying had a similar product. So sales is working on selling a particular product because they see what's coming. Marketing wasn't aware of that. Marketing had a big social campaign they were pushing on this particular product. Turns out after the product launched and they start to get in their numbers and they're beating their chest about how successful we were, come to find out that product was being discontinued. That was such a major fail. Now, given, I'm
Wow.
assuming her company was very big for this to have happened. But the problem was, and this gets into the measurement part, the second part of that is the KPIs that marketing was going by was registrations, website views, social hits, and they were getting really good numbers on that. Their focus was on the campaign, not the
Mhm.
company, right? So the campaign was successful, the
Yeah.
marketers were successful, but it wasn't successful for the company. And
Completely
because
disconnected from the
totally
business.
disconnected. They weren't
Wow.
aligned. They weren't aligned. They didn't know. They weren't attending each other's meetings, and
Uh-huh.
they didn't know where things were going. Now, this could be a cultural or a leadership thing too. Like, why didn't leadership have them in the same meetings? And as I explained these things, I remember a few weeks ago I was given a speech about the book and the book's topic, and someone asked me, "Lee, is there a particular order in which these things should be done in terms of communication, alignment, systems, and honesty?" And it hadn't occurred to me until that moment that, yeah, they are in the correct order. Because as we talk about alignment, we see that they would be better aligned if they had communicated better first,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
communication leads to better alignment. And so, yeah, there's two parts there. There's alignment in messaging and what you're working on, what products you're selling, what your solutions are, what you're taking to market. And then there's also alignment on measurement. We have to develop, this is when I say we, I mean marketers, we have to develop KPIs that match what sales goals are. And so I think we need a total overhaul of marketing KPIs, or at least divide them between internal KPIs, like which ones matter inside marketing and which ones matter outside marketing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Your
I'm a
web traffic,
huge fan of that right
right?
there is
Yeah,
separating what's reported to the business and what you're using just in your day-to-day operations to know if,
right.
you're tactically being, effective.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't want to see our marketers taking, a web traffic report into a sales meeting.
No. No.
you know Maybe the product person will be happy because there's more to their product page, but that's not the sales team. The sales team wants to know what are the conversions, what helped us drive a deal. And so if you take that report beyond the CMO level and say, we see a correlation between, if we direct more traffic to the product page versus the home page, we're getting more clicks to the call button, or that we're getting more form fills to contact sales.
Yeah.
That means something. That says that, okay, marketing is doing things that allow us to have more calls into our sales team. That makes them wake up. Just saying we have more hits or more clicks or more views means nothing to them. It has to relate. So that means when we create our KPIs, it means we either need to have marketing KPIs that mean something to sales, or we create KPIs with sales that are revenue KPIs to say things like funnel velocity. When sales and marketing work together, we have leads go from unknown to known to customer faster than we did before we enacted this particular system, this method of working. And so that's kind of the overall goal of the whole cash book altogether, is how does sales and marketing work together to drive business faster through that virtual funnel. That's the
Yeah.
alignment portion.
And of course, attribution feels sometimes so out of reach. Like, how do we map that, approve that journey, show those stages? How much time do we invest in systems and measurement versus activity? I
Yes.
know a lot of marketers struggle with that, but it's clicking in my mind that the more that sales and marketing value having those KPIs together, you can
Yeah.
make a better business case for investing in the right systems to be able to track that journey.
Yeah. After I gave a speech on this when I was early on doing this, and I remember talking to marketers about, look, these are some things you can no longer report on above the CMO level. But I didn't give them they wanted the exact equations. And so I said to them, I said, you know what? I'll tell you what, I've told you what, isn't as valuable. I told you what you need to do, but I didn't give you the equation. So I tell you what, I'll go and make these. So I immediately went to my website, made an article full of equations. I think there's like 6 equations basically that are designed to be revenue team KPIs that can be led by marketing. So if you go to aleejudge.com, you'll find an article, it's pretty recent, that are KPIs and equations that marketers can plug in and say, okay, this is marketing numbers. This is how it applies to sales. Here's CFO, CEO. Here's the impact of marketing on the bottom line.
All right, good resource. Um, okay, so systems is the third. We've probably already jumped into that a little bit with
Yeah.
this conversation, but when you talk about systems, I jump straight to okay, having a one source of truth, having that CRM that both sales and marketing are using, lead scoring, things like that. Am I on the right track there?
You're on the right track. A lot of my time spent before this book was in marketing operations and sales operations. And again, since I was in this unique position to be between the two, I was Salesforce admin and marketing operations admin at the same time in many of these companies. And what I saw was coming into these companies, often they were siloed, the data was siloed. I have some really unbelievable experiences where I came into one company and they hired me to implement Pardot into Salesforce. They were using Eloqua before. So when I come in, I'm looking to see how their leads are flowing from Eloqua into Salesforce. Turns out they weren't.
Oh,
The marketing team was totally nurturing them in Eloqua.
uh-huh.
They were creating fields per form. Like every marketer created a new field. So they had thousands of fields from t-shirt size to cake preference, all these fields. And that's no wonder why sales didn't want the
No,
connection,
they don't
because
want
it
to
was
see that.
messy. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
thousands of useless fields. So two things had to happen. One, clean up the thousands of useless fields. But two, understand why were they would actually export things out of Eloqua into a spreadsheet, upload them into Salesforce as brand new contacts. Now, if you're a
No.
Salesforce person, there's leads and then contacts, but that's
Yeah.
Salesforce specific. But long story short, they came in fresh with no history. So here you are, a salesperson making a call on someone as if they had never heard of you before.
Oh, what a miss. Oh.
Not what a mess. It doesn't look good for the salesperson. Now, given they wouldn't have made it into Salesforce in that method had they not done something.
Yeah.
So here you are, a salesperson, not knowing that they've been on your website 1,000 times. They've downloaded white papers. They've been to webinars. They've been on your product pages, but you know none of that because of that disconnect.
Yeah.
So my project, it was, as someone who loves plugging together marketing operations and sales operations platforms, it was a wonderful puzzle to put together.
Oh,
Took
yeah.
almost a year and a half to do it because of all the cleanup. But we were able to create one single journey that wasn't a marketing funnel and a sales funnel. It was a revenue funnel, so that when they first heard about us, whether it be a video, a white paper, webinar, whatever, when they went from unknown to known, we could watch that journey all the way through to a deal being closed. And that meant that marketing could get feedback from what happens down the funnel, right? So yeah, we may have handed over to sales, but is it getting stuck somewhere? What can marketing do to help push them beyond sales accepted? That's just
Mhm.
halfway. Just because sales has it doesn't mean marketing can't still help push it through to a deal, because you're still
Sure.
got a whole half a funnel to go. So your lower funnel content and events still go there. So marketing has to view that. What I found was, though, that marketing tends to have a view into the CRM, but sales rarely has a view back to the marketing operation platform,
Mm.
because as soon as you put the word marketing into it, sales closes their ears. So that process of making this full journey, also a part of that was showing sales, look, there's a lot of information that happened before you were in the picture. And we've all heard the stat from 60, 70, 80% of the customer journey happens before it gets to sales. So why would you cut yourself off from all that journey, right? That's what they were doing in essence. So now we have this full funnel. If you want to, if people now are kind of, they don't want to say the word funnel, but it is just a visual of
Yeah.
how we go from many possible customers to one actual customer. So that
Yeah.
it still exists. It's different. It's not linear, but it still exists. And
Yeah, I'm
so,
I'm with you. I feel like it is a helpful visual or concept to figure out how we're narrowing down the tire kickers to who's serious, but that
yeah,
it's not linear and we accept both of those things. And
yeah,
there's not going to be this perfect way of mapping it,
no,
particularly in B, in our space it's B to B to maybe there's a few more B's in there.
yeah.
So it's a long sales cycle, might be 2 years, might be 5 years. So it's important to have this data of all these things that customers are doing and nurture them and keep them warm and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, and
So,
there's a diagram in the book that shows the funnel, and even I admit people hate the term funnel sometimes, but it is just a way for us to visualize and discuss this many to few, and it even acknowledges the funnel has holes all on the side of it. They come in as a lead, they go back out as a lead on the side of the funnel. They might capture a buyer's group and go back into the top again with that buyer's group. Then
mm,
they may become a prospect. They may still leave again and go back out. It could be the wrong season, wrong budget, or they got to go
yeah.
get another buyer's group. And I explained to a group last week, I said, you know what? Sometimes that buyer's group could be going out to get the procurement or legal involved, which is good, which means they're really considering you, which also means they could be ghosted. You could be ghosted for months while they're doing the thing you want them to do before they come back to the funnel again and come down to be a customer. So that it's not linear. Again, it's the customer's journey and not ours. And all we can do is give them what they need as they go along their journey.
Yeah, helpful content, finding them at the right place at the right time, all of that good stuff that we know as marketers we need to do.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the last section of the book is on honesty, and that's interesting. So I guess we already touched on it a little bit of having honesty and how you're making product claims, but why also do you have that as a whole section of the book?
One of the stories in the book kind of explains it too. There was a case where I'm a marketer, young marketer, just naive enough to speak up and not be afraid for my job. And there was a salesperson who said, hey, he was doing his monthly or his weekly report to the CEO. And he says, hey, I was lucky to have this Bluebird, which is this deal that just fell out of the sky. Like he just said, yeah, they just called us up, hadn't talked to them before, and we closed the deal. And I was brave enough to say, excuse me, no, this wasn't a Bluebird. Now, I was probably committing the cardinal sin of working in a meeting. So I pulled it up in Marketo at the time. Turns out that person had been with us for 2 years. They had been going to webinars, reading web pages, downloading white papers, and they were doing some of this activity very close to when they actually called the salesperson. So they had been heavily involved in what marketing was putting out. And so as a marketer, I had to say, look, no, this wasn't all you. I'm sorry. And when I told this story on stage, someone asked a question later on, but like, Lee, aren't we going to piss off some of the salespeople by calling them out to say that they didn't do this? And I said, you may have to, but it's going to build your credibility. It's going to build marketing's value to the C-suite to say, look, you don't want to cut our budget because these so-called bluebirds you think are happening are coming from marketing because marketing did this. Now, if you want to get rid of all these bluebirds that you're loving so much, then cut the marketing budget, but you don't want to do that. And so it does call out sales a bit, but it also shows that it's a revenue team. It's not just sales.
I was going to
Very,
say, it
very,
doesn't call them out for being a bad salesperson. It
it's
just
not.
calls
It's
them
calling
out as,
reality out.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
the C-suite will appreciate that you are helping them understand how their pipeline actually works, right?
Hmm.
Because they don't want to be in the blind of how things actually work, but because they have to make budgeting decisions. Where does the money go to? Does it go to this trade show? Does it go to hiring more salespeople or more software? If they don't know these things, if they don't know that these white papers or videos or podcasts are actually driving business, they'll cut those and not realize how valuable they are.
Yeah.
They also won't know how long it may take. For example, that podcast, that video may have been holding that person in your circle for 2 years, right? That customer may not have had the budget 2 years ago, but you kept their attention through the podcast or the video. And now you can show that. Now, if someone says, hey, let's launch a podcast, and they ask you for results in the first quarter of launching it, you're not going to find it, right? But if you have that kind of data over time, when that so-called bluebird shows up, you say, you know what? This person has been listening to our podcast for a year. They're not a bluebird. That's when you can show the value of these things that are hard to prove in numbers immediately, but they are easy to prove historically. So that's the honesty part. We have to be honest about where these deals come from and who all is involved in making them happen.
You mean we can't just buy a Zoom info list and have sales call them and it just works?
Just
What?
doesn't work, right? I mean, let's say you buy that Zoom info list and you do find someone who may be a possible a client of yours, right? So you call them up and they say, well, I'm not interested. But then they go, I wasn't really looking, but I'll look when I am. Then when they become interested, they go to your website. They're going to go to the website, marketing. They're going to watch a video, marketing. They might now get retargeted by something that marketing did. Maybe there's an ad there somewhere. Or they go to the videos of a podcast. They don't have time to watch it right now on their computer. They bookmark it. They get in their car and listen to your podcast. Now they're locked into you for maybe an hour, 30 minutes or so. Over time, yes, that person you may have found on Zoom info, right? Because of marketing stayed with you. That one cold call here's how it looks in the CRM. CRM says, person found from Zoom info. We call them, 5-minute phone call. They're not ready to buy, hang up, end of CRM data. Right. And then we think Zoom info didn't even work because it was a cold call, didn't work. That person is researching for the next year and they're with us. We have their attention, but we may not be able to track all that information. There's
Right.
also there's 0-click marketing. But even with Zoom info, now we're seeing that even it isn't coin operated. You can buy all these leads and you can call them with cold calls. They still may not move until they've been experiencing marketing for a while.
Yeah. So, how do you explain the fact that you can't track those 0-click things? Do you use other types of metrics to help educate C suite? Do you use anecdotal evidence from talking to some newly closed customers and asking them about their journey? Or how do you weave that story for skeptical executives?
Yeah, well, the anecdotal evidence is good. It's because of the word anecdotal, it may be dismissed by some, but you can't beat asking a customer, how did you
Mhm.
find us? Because you're going to hear things you just would have never thought of. And
Yeah.
it often requires a second question, like how'd you find us? Really? What led you there, kind of thing. We had someone last week who said, we asked them, how'd you find us? They said, Google. Turns out they were using Google as a verb. They were searching for us in ChatGPT, and we showed up in ChatGPT. They hadn't actually Googled
Interesting.
us. Yeah, because we were tracking the inbound, and we were able, because they filled a form out, we were able to see the UTMs. We know they came from OpenAI, ChatGPT.
Mhm.
Um, but in terms of proving those things, so there's a couple things. One, we have to be on a crusade to explain that marketing is a long game. Everything isn't trackable. Just 2, maybe 3 years ago, I did a presentation called Click to Close. It was the last time I preached tracking from click to close because
Ah.
those days are gone.
Just yeah. It
And
was a nice phase for us. It was great
we had a nice
having all
run.
that data, but
We
it's
had a
over.
nice run. And
Yeah.
now we can track some of those clicks, but they're clues, right? They're not pure evidence. They're clues to say, okay, this video or this video led to a form fill. That's one of probably 10 touches, but we do know about that one. And
Mhm.
so it gives you clues as to what's working. It's not definitive by any means anymore, but it does give you clues as to things you don't want to give up doing, right?
Yeah.
So if you keep hearing from time to time that people are listening to your podcast or watching videos, you know that that's one thing you probably should not stop doing. You should keep doing that. But, a lot of that goes to, as I mentioned in the book, who are you reporting to? Because that determines how difficult it is to explain, right? If you're explaining to a CMO, they might get it. You're explaining to a CEO or CRO, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because they're going to want hard numbers. And that's where the education comes in to say, look, marketing is not coin operated. This thing we're doing, because we know from industry standards and not just our anecdotes, but once you have enough anecdotes across different companies, it becomes data,
Mhm.
right? So it
Mhm.
may only happen to us once or twice, but if it happened to us once or twice, and then once or twice, and then once or twice, it's actually some data you can stand on. So that's where you go. You say, well, we're seeing this. Is anybody else seeing this? And you
Mhm.
find data to support that, to say, look, CRO, we're getting a hint of this, and so are they, and so are they. So let's keep doing these videos. Or let's keep doing this podcast. And then you still do the things we used to do in terms of tracking. I mean, you still get into your Google Analytics. You still do those things, but the difference is now they are clues and guidance and not fact. We have to
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah. And engineer executives struggle with this discomfort of not having that formula, that coin operated model. So I like how you put that. Thank you.
There's an example that Rand Fishkin gave, and this is, I guess, a classic marketing example I'm sure you've heard of too, but think about Coca-Cola's billboards when they first began doing billboards. They were not trackable. There was no clicks, right? It's not internet. I mean, the fact that we even have billboards today means something. They're
Yeah.
not clickable, right? But why do we spend money on billboards? Because those impressions we know work and the
Mhm.
repetition works. And so Coca-Cola's data was such that, well, in a town where we have a billboard, we sell more Coke than we do in towns where we don't have a billboard,
There you go.
right?
Yeah.
So even though they couldn't say specifically, correlation is causation, the trend makes sense to
Mhm.
say, well, we did this and that worked, and we didn't do it and it didn't work. Let's do more of that. And that's kind of how we have to be as marketers now. I mean, my podcast, for example, if I were to go by podcast statistics like downloads and listens, I would never do a podcast. But I have customers that have well beyond blown out the ROI of having a podcast just by those few customers, because they may have made a Zoom info type call in June and then call us back until December because they've been locked into the podcast and they've been vetting us through the podcast and say, oh, they know what they're talking about. We've been listening to them. Now the
Mhm.
podcast, if I were to look at the downloads, oh, quit podcasting, right? But that one or
Yeah.
two customers who say, yes, we've been engaged through your podcast for the last 6 months, that alone makes it worth having a podcast.
Well, speaking of podcasts, that's something that I know that your agency, Content Monster, helps companies with in addition to videos. So let's talk a little bit about that. What do you guys
Yeah.
do?
So we produce podcasts. We began doing remote production around 2019. We were doing a lot of video production at the time, hauling around cameras and equipment, and we decided, how can we expand beyond? I'm in Atlanta. I couldn't hire beyond Atlanta. I couldn't grow beyond Atlanta without hauling equipment around. So we began studying remote production for both video and podcasting. And then when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden demand just went through the roof. We were ready.
Perfect.
As they say, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So we were ready, and we weren't even planning on launching it as a service until the pandemic hit. And then all of a sudden, everyone needed it. So we began doing podcasts, and then podcasts became video. And then now we're doing strictly video production remotely. That's what I talked about recently at Social Media Marketing World, which was, we have these 4K studios in our pocket, our phones, our webcams. So those are the wands, and what Content Monster provides is the wizard. In other words, how do you use this kind of content? We have kits. We send out kits with cameras and mics and things that are small, designed for an executive to say, look, this is a doctor or a CEO. They're not technical. They need to plug and play and get them online with our coach, right? So they get the kit, they plug and play. Our coach has a conversation with them. Maybe somebody on the marketing team has a conversation with them. We capture this content and we post produce it into great content for their website, for their socials, vertical, horizontal, whatever. And in that, also it's podcasting. Same thing. We help them look and sound good because podcasts now are video first, audio second, as opposed to what they were even 3 years ago.
Yeah. Well, here we are in video. So I attest to
Exactly.
that. And it was a big change for me, Lee, because I have hair and makeup to deal with. You just like roll out of bed and get on and look great.
I
So
wish. I wish.
but it shows that video component is important. We have our social media specialist on the True Marketing team, Casey. We had a team retreat, and she was encouraging everyone to get on video more and talking about this journey that everyone has to go up and over cringe mountain
Yeah, that's a
and
good
to
way
get
to.
over that cringy feeling. And so I appreciate this way of setting the executive up for success with a coach and with the right equipment and just all of that not only shortcuts some things, but also gives them more confidence that they're not just like, holding their phone up, or whatever. They
Yeah,
have the right setup.
that's been a big deal. I mean, we've had clients who their executives would not have done video if it wasn't that easy for them. They needed
Ah,
to know they were handheld. Like, look, we're not going to ask you to do a TikTok video, hold up your phone in your hand and walk around your kitchen. This is going to feel to you more like a Zoom meeting. In other words, you can click on your computer, you can sit at your desk, you're in your comfort zone, right? The difference is we're going to have a natural conversation. And there's going to be a producer there with you. If your mic doesn't work, there'll be somebody there to help you fix your mic virtually, right?
mhm.
If your hair's got a flyaway, we'll tell you. We'll make sure you look good. We'll make sure you don't sound stiff and over prepared. And so we have methods that our producers use to help people relax and seem natural. We did a video last week where we knew we had two stiff executives, but the end goal was to have a fun, exciting video to recruit students. I think it must have been a university or something. But they were using like the professors and some doctors to do the video. So the challenge was, how do you take these professional people who aren't comfortable on camera, but make a fun video that is worthy of attracting students? So the way we did that was we coached them through getting some fun moments, some laughable moments. We got them to smile and relax. And, all we needed was all these little bites. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
with the
Cool.
bites and the B-roll and the icons and all the kind of, emojis and things, it turned out to be a really fun, exciting video. And they were like, they were just jaw dropped. They're like, wow, we look fun. It's like, well,
Neat.
it was
Neat.
the wizard, not the wand.
Oh my gosh, I could just imagine the personas that you've created for the different types of speakers that you're coaching. And
We
then,
do have
yeah,
some
I'm sure
names.
they exist. That's a whole nother conversation there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, where can people connect with you and learn more about Content Monster?
So I guess you could start with aleejudge.com. That's where you can find me specifically. And also the website Content Monster is content, MONSTA, monsta.com. So those are the two main places. You can find the book on aleejudge.com and learn about producing content on contentmonster.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This is a really fun conversation.
Thank you, Wendy. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.